So many years ago now, when I preached one of my first sermons on the climate crisis here at the Unitarian Society, one of the first of several, and I'm sure not the last, I remember a specific moment here in this room. I think it was during the benediction, when we were all gathered, holding hands, ready to sing the closing song. And it was suddenly very clear to me that if things ever got really bad, if the proverbial you-know-what ever hit the fan, if the world really truly did fall apart around us, then this place and these people would be where I would show up to figure out what to do. I think I may even have said it out loud. Turn and look around, because this is the community that will be gathered to get us through whatever may come next. After a sermon that was probably, I'm sure, a little bit depressing given the topic, this is where I found hope that whatever happens among us here on this earth, that we don't have to face it in isolation, that there are places and people that wade into the waters together. 10 years ago, or whenever it was that I preached that sermon, I had no idea. I had no idea about the fires and mud flows and that eerie time for weeks when the sky turned yellow and you couldn't even see to the end of your block. Do you remember that, those of you who were here? I had no idea that the rain would come faster than this city was built to handle, and the creeks would overflow their banks, and the roads would turn into waterways. I had no idea about the election of 2017, and the summer of 2020 after the killing of George Floyd, and the January 6th insurrection the year later, and the resurgence of white nationalism and the threat of fascism looming here in the United States. And I had no idea about the pandemic, the invisible threat that would kill millions around the world and scatter us into our separate spaces for nearly 2 years, that still haunts the spaces between us. And in each of these situations, and that's just in my short tenure here in this long history of the congregation, in each of these situations, this community has responded with remarkable resilience and compassion and this willingness to just lean in and learn and adapt. A few weeks ago, I was sitting with members of the Vision team, who are the folks helping clarify the congregation's vision for this future capital campaign we're planning, and we were talking about the Unitarian Society's history of rising to the occasion and recovering time and time again after crisis. This congregation that has been here for almost 150 years has seen its fair share of disasters. This building we are in right now is here because the previous building fell down in the earthquake of 1925. This beautiful sanctuary was born out of crisis. Over the generations, the members of this community have emerged from the ashes of the Civil War when the congregation first got off the ground. They've lived through more than one pandemic, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, Vietnam, the tumultuous 1960s. There have been internal crises. The congregation was nearly torn apart by ministerial misconduct several decades ago. And we've responded to social crises, crises of housing and homelessness, people seeking a safer place in our community. Immigration justice and racial justice, the environmental crisis. We've emerged over and over again to meet these needs. And so as we were considering this legacy, this incredible legacy of the Unitarian Society here, the Vision team and I were talking about how we've been great at crisis response, at embracing this bold vision when times are hard. And when a building falls down, it gets rebuilt stronger and more beautiful than it was. But looking ahead at the future of the Unitarian Society, The vision team and I had this conversation about what's a little bit different right now with what we're doing right now in this visioning process. Because despite all of the challenges and crises in the world today, this upcoming campaign, this thing we're trying to envision here, it's actually more than crisis response. We are trying actually to get on the other side of crisis response into a sense of possibility. Not just what needs to be done, not just what has to be fixed to preserve what we've got, but rather what can we do to build the future we hope for? What are we doing, the vision team articulated? What we're doing is we're building this future not just born out of catastrophe, not just a response to trauma, but growing upward from a sense of possibility. It's necessary to dream of blue skies too, not just storms. It's necessary to do what Keir so beautifully articulated in that vision of lying on your back and seeing the sky overhead and imagining what could be. Blue sky thinking is this phrase for entering that creative dreaming where we imagine that all the obstacles have disappeared, the clouds have parted, and there is the possibility of a bright future. How long has it been since you've allowed yourself permission to believe in the possibility of a bright future? It's a way of asking ourselves, given what we've got, and it's a lot here at the Unitarian Society, and given the future that our values call us toward, the future we hope to create, what can we make possible that will strengthen people in the generations to come as they face their own moments of crisis and change? What can we give from our own experience of what we have lived through in our lives, collectively and individually, that will support those who will come after us to live into the flourishing of their lives, no matter what may come? What legacy of resilience and hope do we want to build into the very walls of these buildings, tangible and real, that will enable people to survive and thrive? And how does the space we inhabit reinforce the values that we hope to live by? And there's some themes beginning to emerge from this conversation, themes of resilience and welcome, and a sustainable, ecologically minded community that thinks of the generations ahead, not just the now. And not just the resilience of the buildings themselves, but how the space can support the emotional and spiritual resilience of the people who occupy it, whether they're members of this congregation or members of the wider community who come here for all kinds of reasons and leave feeling held and supported and encouraged and connected to this community. How do we keep our doors open and lights shining when the power goes out? Both literally, how do we keep our lights shining when the power goes out with sustainable and renewable and dependable resources? But also, how do we keep the lights shining within us, powered by connection and beauty and a sense of the sacred, a sense of meaning and purpose that extends beyond just one moment? What do we need to build for that kind of deep resilience? The vision team is asking us this question right now, to take this leap of imagination into the future of this community and dream about what that means. And there's lots of ideas out there, and we're still in this very early phase of collecting and gathering and surfacing what's possible. Because, my friend, the future needs us. They need us to be good ancestors right now, right? All of us are going to be ancestors one day. And we have the choice right now what kind of ancestors we want to be. Our children and our grandchildren need us to be good ancestors right now. They need us to look up into that clear blue sky and think not just about this moment, but imagine a future where they can flourish, their beautiful selves in the sun. Because this future where all people can flourish with worth and dignity, this future is not certain. We are a faith of constructive and creative power. We are not a faith dependent upon a preordained eschatology, right? A preordained arc that we just have to sit back and wait for to arrive. That's not our theology. Our theology is that we build it together. We co-create the future we want. And it only exists if people like you, like all of us, work to create it. It's not preordained. And if there aren't people of goodwill thinking about that future, and not just thinking and dreaming, but then building and investing in it, making those dreams into a reality, if people of goodwill don't do this work, then the future will be shaped by other agendas. And we can see that happening right now. Because I have seen more clearly, perhaps, than I ever have before, that if we don't seize this moment to build the spaces and places that will hold space for people to renew and recharge and connect, if we let community building hubs like the Unitarian Society kind of slip away into the past, then the future will have lost something precious and necessary. Because there are other people thinking about the future with a very different set of values than those we live into here at the Unitarian Society. There are think tanks, my friends. There are anti-democratic associations. There are white nationalist organizations making plans and building power. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not. But I'm not talking about shadowy underground organizations and rumors. I'm talking about well-funded, well-connected organizations with websites and social media accounts and documented plans for reshaping the future as we know it and as our children will live it. We cannot wait to just respond to a crisis, even though we are really good at that. And even though we know another crisis will eventually present itself, we have to be proactive. We can't just define ourselves by what we are not, what we don't want. We have to imagine what we want to become. We have to imagine those blue skies and build it and dream it into being. In 1971, in the midst of the Vietnam War, the beat poet Diane de Prima wrote a poem called Rant. I like the title already, which outlined the critical need for people to cultivate a powerful imagination, an imagination stronger than war and destruction because people's lives depended on it. And this is an excerpt from that poem she wrote. There is no way out of the spiritual battle. The war is the war against the imagination. You can't sign up as a conscientious objector. The war of the worlds hangs here, right now, in the balance. It is a war for this world to keep a veil of soul-making. To keep it a veil of soul-making. The war is the war for the human imagination, and no one can fight it but you. No one can fight it for you. The imagination is not only holy, it is precise. It is not only fierce, it is practical. Men die every day for the lack of it. What I love about de Prima's poem is that she not only calls people into this practice of holy imagination, as she names it, she calls for us to cultivate an imagination as precise and as fierce and as practical, as real as we can make it. Keeping the soul of the world intact requires a vision, and without that vision, she says, people die for want of it. They die in wars because we can't imagine peace. They die in hospitals because we can't imagine well-being, in bathrooms and back alleys and prison cells because we can't imagine liberation, in isolation and loneliness because we can't imagine community and connection. We need sacred containers for the kind of imagination that will heal us and the world. And we must cultivate this fierce and liberatory imagination that is practical and precise as much as it is holy and human. We must not only imagine the kind of community we want to be, but the container in which that community exists. The way it looks and feels, the way the buildings sit lightly upon the earth. The way the campus is accessible and beautiful and soul-sustaining for each and every person who arrives here. Who knows what insights will emerge from you all at the start of this process that will add to this long-term legacy of this community. We can build up the capacity of this sacred space, this gift we have been given, so that it can be resilient enough to respond to whatever comes next, because we were the people bold enough to dream that future into being. This is our task, my friends. So let's take some time over this next month or two and imagine those blue skies. No barriers, letting the clouds part, and what would happen if we invested in our dream of a beautiful world. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Let us sing into that future now together. Yes, rise in body and song. Put that energy into the way we're going to sing together. I can see clearly now this optimistic and lovely opportunity to lie back and look at those blue skies together.